History was in the news again this week, so let's get right to our top stories. The NAACP issued a travel advisory for the state of Florida because, as it said, Florida is, quote, openly hostile to African Americans, people of color, and to LGBTQ plus individuals. This announcement, they said, was inspired in part by Governor Ron DeSantis', quote, aggressive attempts to erase black history. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas did not like this announcement, and he went on Twitter to say some really dumb things about Martin Luther King and was promptly stomped by historians. In New York City, officials granted landmark status and $6 million for restoration to the last known segregated school for African Americans. So-called Colored School No. 4 was built in 1849, and from 1860 to 1894, it educated some of the city's black children. Kudos to my friend and fellow historian Eric K. Washington for discovering the building's significance, which included the fact that the building protected African American children during the draft riots of 1863, and for spearheading the effort to get landmark status. In the state of Maine, the family of a sailor who was killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 was just notified that his remains have finally been identified. Stanley Allen was one of more than 400 sailors killed when the USS Oklahoma was torpedoed and sank. And he was one of dozens whose remains were never identified. But in recent years, a team has been using DNA analysis and dental records to identify those remains. Stanley Allen will be returned to the state of Maine for burial in August. In Pennsylvania, the National Park Service announced that an extensive archaeological excavation had finally located the precise location of where the first shots were fired in the French and Indian War way back in 1754. That incident, known as the Jumonville Affair, involved a clash between French troops and their Native American allies and some Virginia colonial troops and their Native American allies. That latter group was commanded by a young, unknown 22-year-old colonel named George Washington. The archaeologists found musket balls and lots of other evidence that they were able to date to the 1750s. And finally, historian Simon Sebag Montefiore has compiled the list of the best history songs to go along with his new book, The World, A Family History of Humanity. Can you guess the number one song? It's Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. And you can see the whole playlist at Spotify. All right, that's going to do it for History in the News this week. You can find links to all these stories in the notes that accompany this video. See you next week.